Hello, Marini, Marini. Today we are reading some fairy tales. Hello. Okay, so I bought a book. I do tend to have like a bit of a stutter when I'm reading sometimes, but I hope if you're having trouble falling asleep or anything, I hope this stream can help out a little bit. Marketing. Okay. Book. Alrighty. Okay. The Frog King or Iron Henry. In old times, when wishing still helped one, there lived a king whose daughters were all beautiful, but the youngest was so beautiful that the sun itself, which had seen so much, was astonished. Whenever it shone in her face, close by the king's castle lay a great dark forest, and under an old lime tree in the forest was a well. And when the day was very warm, the king's child went out into the forest and sat down by the side of the cool fountain. And when she was dull, she took a golden ball and threw it up on high and caught it. And this ball was her favorite plaything. Now, it so happened that on one occasion, the princess's golden ball did not fall into the little hand, which she was holding up for it, but on the ground beyond and rolled straight into the water. The king's daughter followed it with her eyes, oh gosh, but it vanished. And the well was deep, so deep that the bottom could not be seen. On this she began to cry, and cried louder and louder, and could not be comforted. And as she thus lamented, someone said to her, "What ails thee, king's daughter?" Oh. "What ails thee, king's daughter? Thou weepest so that even a stone would show pity." She looked around to the side from whence the voice came, and saw a frog stretching forth its thick, ugly head from the water. Oh, God. Old water splasher. "Is it thou?" she said. "I am weeping for my golden ball, which has fallen into the well." "Be quiet and do not weep," answered the frog. "I can help thee, but what wilt thou give me if I bring thy plaything up again?" "Whatever thou wilt have, dear frog," she said. "My clothes, my pearls and jewels, and even the golden crown which I am wearing." The frog answered, "I do not care for thy clothes, thy pearls and jewels, or thy golden crown, but if thou wilt love me and let me be thy companion and playfellow, and sit by thee at thy little table, and eat off thy little golden plate, and drink out of thy little cup, and sleep in thy little bed, if thou wilt promise me this, I will go down below and bring thee thy golden ball up again." "Oh yes," said she, "I promise thee all thou wishest, if thou wilt but bring my ball back again," she said. However, thought, how the silly frog does talk. He lives in the water with the other frogs and croaks, and can be no companion to any human being. But the frog, when he had received this promise, put his head into the water, and sank down. In a short while, came up again with the ball in his mouth, and threw it on the grass. The king's daughter was delighted to see her pretty plaything once more, and picked it up and ran away with it. "Wait, wait," said the frog. "Take me with thee. I can't run as thou canst." But what did it avail him to scream his croak, croak after her as loudly as he could? She did not listen to it, but ran home and soon forgot the poor frog, who was forced to go back down into his well again. The next day, when she had seated herself at the table with the king and all the courtiers and was eating from her little golden plate, something came creeping. Splish, splash, splish, splash, up the marble stairs, and when it had gone to the top, it knocked at the door and cried, "Princess, youngest princess, open the door for me." She ran to see who was outside, but when she opened the door, there sat the frog in front of it. Then she slammed the door too, in great haste, sat down to dinner again, and was quite frightened. The king saw plainly that her heart was beating violently and said, "My child, what art thou so afraid of? Is there perchance a giant outside who wants to carry thee away?" "Ah, no," replied she. "It is no giant, but a disgusting frog." "What does a frog want with thee?" "Ah, dear father, yesterday, as I was in the forest, sitting by the well, playing with my golden ball, fell into the water, and because I cried so, the frog brought it out again for me. And because he so insisted, I promised him he should be my companion. But I never thought he would be able to come out of his water, and now he's out there and wants to come into me." In the meantime, it knocked a second time and cried, "Princess, youngest princess, open the door for me. Dost thou not know what thou saidst to me yesterday by the cool waters of the fountain? Princess, youngest princess, open the door for me." Then said the king, "That which thou hast promised must thou perform. Go and let him in." She went and opened the door. The frog hopped in and followed her, step by step, to her chair. There he sat and cried, "Lift me up beside thee." She delayed, until at last the king commanded her to do it. When the frog was once on the chair, he wanted to be on the table. And when he was on the table, he said, "Now push thy little golden plate nearer to me, that we may eat together." She did this, but it was easy to see she did not do it willingly. The frog enjoyed what he ate, but almost every mouthful she took choked her. At length he said, I have eaten and am satisfied. Now I am tired. Carry me into thy little room, and make thy little silken bed ready, and we will both lie down and go to sleep." The king's daughter began to cry, for she was afraid of the cold frog, which she did not like to touch, and which was now to sleep in her pretty, clean little bed. But the king grew angry and said, "He who helped thee when thou wert in trouble ought not afterwards to be despised by thee." So she took hold of the frog with 2 fingers, carried him upstairs, and put him in a corner. But when she was in bed, he crept to her and said, "I am tired. I want to sleep as well as thou. Lift me up, or I will tell thy father." Then she was terribly angry, and took him up and threw him with all her might against the wall. "Now thou wilt be quiet, odious frog," said she. But when he fell down, he was no frog, but a king's son, with beautiful, kind eyes. He went by her father's will, was now her dear companion and husband. Then he told her how he had been bewitched by a wicked witch, and how no one could have delivered him from the well but herself. And that tomorrow they would go together into his kingdom. Then they went to sleep. And next morning, when the sun woke them, a carriage came driving up with 8 white horses, which had white ostrich feathers on their heads, were harnessed with golden chains, and behind stood the young king's servant, Faithful Henry. Faithful Henry had been so unhappy when his master was changed into a frog that he had caused 3 iron bands to be laid around his heart, lest it should burst with grief and sadness. The carriage was to conduct the young king into his kingdom. Faithful Henry helped them both in, and placed himself behind again, and was full of joy because of this deliverance. And when they had driven a part of the way, the king's son heard a crackling behind him, as if something had broken. So he turned around and cried, "Henry, the carriage is breaking!" "No, master, it is not the carriage. It is a band from my heart, which was put there in my great pain, when you were a frog and imprisoned in the well." Again and once again, while they were on their way, something cracked, and each time the king's son thought the carriage was breaking, but it was only the bands which was springing from the heart of Faithful Henry, because his master was set free and was happy. Yeah! So that was story number 1, which was The Frog King, or Iron Henry. You might actually recognize this one as like The Princess and the Frog too. And there was no kissing involved. Rather, they had to share a plate, share a cup. How a yeet saved the prince, indeed. Indeed, indeed. I didn't mention this, but if you would like, feel free to have this stream in the background as something to let you fall asleep to. Okay? Destroyed. It was a faithful one, faithful person. It's a nice story though, yeah. No, we're gonna read a few stories today, okay? Did you guys prefer it being in one ear or slightly in both ears? Thank you so much for the gifted Avilion. Both? Alright. Then we shall go on to the next story. Cat and Mouse in Partnership. A certain cat had made the acquaintance of a mouse, and had said so much to her about the great love and friendship she felt for her, that at length the mouse agreed that they should live and keep house together. "But we must make a provision for winter, or else we shall suffer from hunger," said the cat. "And you, little mouse, cannot venture everywhere, or you will be caught in a trap some day." The good advice was followed, and a pot of fat was bought, but they did not know where to put it. At length, after much consideration, the cat said, I know no place where it will be better stored up I know no place where it will be better stored up than in the church, for no one dares take anything away from there. We will set it beneath the altar, and not touch it until we are really in need of it. So the pot was placed in safety, but it was not long before the cat had great yearning for it, and said to the mouse, "I want to tell you something, little mouse, My cousin has brought a little son into the world and has asked me to be godmother. He is white with brown spots, and I am to hold him over the font at the christening. Let me go out today, and you look after the house by yourself." "Yes, yes," answered the mouse. "By all means go, and if you get anything very good, think of me. I would like a drop of sweet red christening wine too." All this, however, was untrue. The cat had no cousin, and had not been asked to be godmother. She went straight to the church, stole the pot of fat, began to lick at it, and licked the top of the fat off. Then she took a walk upon the roof of the town, looked out for opportunities, and then stretched herself in the sun, licked her lips whenever she thought of the pot of fat. Not until it was evening did she return home. "Well, here you are again," said the mouse. "No doubt you have had a merry day." "All went off well," answered the cat. "What name did they give the child?" "Top off," said the cat quite coolly. "Top off," cried the mouse. "That is a very odd and uncommon name. Is it a usual one in your family?" "What does it signify?" said the cat. "It is no worse than Crumb Stealer, as your godchildren are called." Before long, the cat was seized by another fit of longing. She said to the mouse, "You must do me a favor, and once more manage the house for a day alone. I am again asked to be godmother, and as the child has a white ring around its neck, I cannot refuse." The good mouse consented, but the cat crept behind the town halls to the church and devoured half the pot of fat. "Nothing ever seems so good as what one keeps to oneself," said she, and was quite satisfied with her day's work. When she went home, the mouse inquired, "And what was this child christened?" "Half done," answered the cat. "Half done? What are you saying? I never heard the name in my life. I'll wager anything it is not in the calendar." The cat's mouth soon began to water for some more licking. "All good things go in threes," said she. I am asked to stand godmother again. The child is quite black, only it has white paws. But with that exception, it has not a single white hair on its whole body. This only happens once every few years. You will let me go, won't you?" "Top off, half done," answered the mouse. "They are such odd names. They make me very thoughtful." "You sit at home," said the cat, "in your dark grey fur coat and long tail, and are filled with fancies. That's because you do not go out in the daytime." During the cat's absence, the mouse cleaned the house and put it in order, but the greedy cat entirely emptied the pot of fat. "When everything is eaten up, one has some peace," said she to herself, and well filled and fat she did not return home till night. The mouse at once asked what name had been given to the third child. "It will not please you more than the others," said the cat. "He is called All Gone." "All Gone!" cried the mouse. "That is the most suspicious name of all. I have never seen it in print. All Gone. What can that mean?" She shook her head, curled herself up, and lay down to sleep. From this time forth, no one invited the cat to be godmother. But when the winter had come, and there was no longer anything to be found outside, the mouse thought of their provision, and said, "Come, cat, we will go to our pot of fat, which we have stored up for ourselves. We shall enjoy that." "Yes," answered the cat, "you will enjoy it as much as you would enjoy sticking that dainty tongue of yours out of the window." They set out on their way, But when they arrived, the pot of fat certainly was still in its place, but it was empty. "Alas!" said the mouse. "Now I see what has happened. Now it comes to light. You are a true friend. You have devoured all when you were standing godmother. First top off, then half done, then—" "Will you hold your tongue?" cried the cat. One word more, and I will eat you too." "All gone," was already on the poor mouse's lips. Scarcely had she spoken it before the cat sprang onto her, seized her, and swallowed her down. Verily, that is the way of the world. All gone. Oh goodness. The provisions for the winter, all gone. Kind of morbid indeed, yeah. So that was the story of cat and mouse in partnership. Not too much of a partnership. However, it's quite an interesting story. Classic Brother Grimm's right there. Truly now, all gone. Shall we continue on to another story? This next one is slightly longer than the last two. Oh god. More tales. Our next story is Our Lady's Child. Hard by a great forest dwelt a woodcutter with his wife, who had an only child, a little girl, 3 years old. They were so poor, however, that they no longer had daily bread, and did not know how to get food for her. One morning, the woodcutter went out sorrowfully to his work in the forest, and while he was cutting wood, suddenly there stood before him a tall and beautiful woman, with a crown of shining stars on her head, who said to him, "I am the Virgin Mary, mother of the child Jesus. Thou art poor and needy. Bring thy child to me. I will take her with me and be her mother and care for her." The woodcutter obeyed, brought his child and gave it to the Virgin Mary, who took her up to heaven with her. There the child fared well, ate sugar cakes, and drank sweet milk, and her clothes were gold, and the little angels played with her. And when she was 14 years of age, the Virgin Mary called her one day and said, "Dear child, I am about to make a long journey, so take into thy keeping the keys of the 13 doors of heaven. 12 of these thou mayest open, and behold the glory which is within them. But the 13th, to which this little key belongs, is forbidden thee. Beware of opening it, or thou wilt bring misery on thyself." The girl promised to be obedient, and when the Virgin Mary was gone, she began to examine the dwellings of the kingdom of heaven. Each day she opened one of them, until she had made the round of the 12. In each of them sat one of the apostles in the midst of a great light, and she rejoiced in all magnificence and splendor, and the little angels who always accompanied her rejoiced with her. Then the forbidden door alone remained, and she felt a great desire to know what could be hidden behind it, and said to the angels, "I will not quite open it, and I will not go inside it, but I will unlock it so that we can just see a little through the opening." "Oh no," said the little angel. that would be a sin. The Virgin Mary has forbidden it, and it might easily cause thy unhappiness. Then she was silent, but the desire in her heart was not stilled, but gnawed there and tormented her and let her have no rest. And once when the angels had all gone out, she thought, now I am quite alone, and I could peep in. If I do it, no one will ever know. She sought out the key, and when she had got it in her hand, she put it in the lock, and when she had put it in, she turned it round as well. Then the door sprang open, and she saw there the Trinity sitting in fire and splendor. She stayed there a while, and looked at everything in amazement, then touched the light a little with her finger, and her finger became quite golden. Immediately, great fear fell onto her. She shut the door violently and ran away. Her terror too would not quit her. Let her do what she might, and her heart beat continually and would not be still. The gold too stayed on her finger and would not go away. Let her rub it and wash it never so much. It was not long before the Virgin Mary came back from her journey. She called the girl before her and asked to have the keys of heaven back. When the maiden gave her the bunch, the Virgin looked into her eyes and said, "Hast thou not opened the 13th door also?" "No," she replied. Then she laid her hand on the girl's heart and felt how it beat, and saw right well that she had disobeyed her order and had opened the door. Then she said once again, "Art thou certain that thou hast not done it?" "Yes," said the girl for the second time. Then she perceived the finger, which had become golden from touching the fire of heaven, and saw well that the child had sinned, and said for the third time, "Hast thou not done it?" "No," said the girl for the third time. Then said the Virgin Mary, "Thou hast not obeyed me, and besides that, thou hast lied. Thou art no longer worthy to be in heaven." Then the girl fell into a deep sleep, and when she awoke, she lay on the earth below, and in the midst of the wilderness she wanted to cry, but she could bring forth no sound. She sprang up and wanted to run away, but whithersoever she turned herself, she was continually held back by thick hedges of thorns, through which she could not break in. In the desert in which she was imprisoned, there stood an old hollow tree. This had to be her dwelling place. Into this she crept when night came, where she slept. Here too she found a shelter from storm and rain. But it was a miserable life, and bitterly did she weep when she remembered how happy she had been in heaven, and how the angels had played with her. Roots and berries were her only food, and for these she sought as far as she could. In the autumn she picked up the fallen nuts and leaves, and carried them into the hall. The nuts were her food in winter, and when snow and ice came, she crept amongst the leaves like a poor little animal, that she might not freeze. Before long, her clothes were all torn, and one bit of them after another fell off her. As soon, however, as the sun shone warm again, she went out and sat in front of the tree. Her long hair covered her on all sides like a mantle. Thus she sat year after year, and felt the pain and the misery of the world. One day, when the trees were once more clothed in fresh green, the king of the country was hunting in the forest, and followed a roe. And as it had fled into the thicket which shut in this part of the forest, he got off his horse, tore the bushes asunder, and cut himself a path with his sword. When he had at last forced his way through, he saw a wonderfully beautiful maiden sitting under the tree, and she sat there and was entirely covered with her golden hair down to her very feet. He stood still and looked at her, full of surprise. Then he spoke to her and said, "Who art thou? Why art thou sitting here in the wilderness?" But she gave no answer, for she could not open her mouth. The king continued, "Wilt thou go with me to my castle?" Then she just nodded her head a little. The king took her in his arms, carried her to his horse, and rode home with her. And when he reached the royal castle, he caused her to be dressed in beautiful garments and gave her all things in abundance. Although she could not speak, she was still so beautiful and charming that he began to love her with all his heart, and it was not long before he married her. After a year or so had passed, the queen brought a son into the world. Thereupon the Virgin Mary appeared to her in the night when she laid in her bed alone and said, "If thou wilt tell the truth and confess that thou didst unlock the forbidden door, I will open thy mouth and give thee back thy speech. But if thou perseverest in thy sin and deniest obstinately, I will take thy newborn child away with me." Then the queen was permitted to answer, but she remained hard and said, "No, I did not open the forbidden door." And the Virgin Mary took the newborn child from her arms and vanished with it. Next morning, when the child was not to be found, it was whispered among the people that the queen was a man-eater and had killed her own child. She heard all this and could say nothing to the contrary. But the king would not believe it, for he loved her so much. When a year had gone by, the queen again bore a son, and in the night the Virgin Mary again came to her and said, "If thou wilt confess that thou openest the forbidden door, I will give thee thy child back and untie thy tongue. But if you continue in sin and deniest it, I will take away with me this new child also." Then the queen again said, "No, I did not open the forbidden door." And the Virgin took the child out of her arms and away with her to heaven. Next morning, when this child also disappeared, the people declared quite loudly that the queen had devoured it, and the king's counselors demanded that she should be brought to justice. The king, however, loved her so dearly that he would not believe it, and commanded the counselors under pain of death not to say any more about it. Then the following year, the queen gave birth to a beautiful little daughter, and for the third time the Virgin Mary appeared to her in the night and said, "Follow me." She took the queen by the hand and led her to heaven, and showed her there her two eldest children who smiled at her and were playing with the ball of the world. When the queen rejoiced thereat, the Virgin Mary said, "Is thy heart not softened yet? If thou wilt own that thou openest the forbidden door, I will give thee back thy two little sons." But for the third time the queen answered, "No, I did not open the forbidden door." Then the Virgin let her sink down to earth once more, and took from her likewise her third child. Next morning, when the loss was reported abroad, all the people cried loudly, "The queen is a man-eater! She must be judged!" And the king was no longer able to restrain his counselors. Thereupon a trial was held, and as she could not answer and defend herself, she was condemned to be burnt alive. The wood was got together, and when she was fast bound to the stake, and the fire began to burn around about her, the hard ice of pride melted her heart, was moved by repentance, and she thought, "If I could but confess before my death that I opened the door." Then her voice came back to her. She cried out loudly, "Yes, Mary, I did it." And straightway rain fell from the sky and extinguished the flames of fire, and a light broke forth above her, and the Virgin Mary descended with the two little sons by her side and the newborn daughter in her arms. She spoke kindly to her and said, "He who repents his sin and acknowledges it, is forgiven. Then gave her the 3 children, untied her tongue, and granted her happiness for her whole life. Sheesh. What's it called? It's like, almost gruesome story. Almost gruesome story, guys. Wait, so what? So the lady, the queen refused to agree that the child, what's it called? That she opened the door, and then they were like, "Hey, did you open the door?" Queen, "No, I did not." And then they'd be like, "Alright then, did you open the door?" "No, I did not." In the end, they were like, "I'm gonna take your children away from you. Now, did you open the door?" "No, I did not." She did open the door, yes. I thought she was going to be turned into gold, yeah. So that was Our Lady's Child. The queen was like, "I have too much pride. But, you know, I guess like this, the moral of the story is to not tell lies. You know? Alright. I can read some more. I can still read some more. Alrighty. Deep existential crisis. Oh goodness. Alright. The story of the youth who went forth to learn what fear was. A certain father had 2 sons, the elder of whom was smart and sensible, and could do everything, but the younger was stupid, and could neither learn nor understand anything. And when people saw him, they said, "There's a fellow who will give his father some trouble." When anything had to be done, it was always the elder who was forced to do it. But if his father bade him fetch anything when it was late, or in the night time, and the way led through the churchyard or any other dismal place, he answered, "Oh no, father, I'll not go there. It makes me shudder," for he was afraid. Or when stories were told by the fire at night, which made the flesh creep, the listeners sometimes said, it makes us shudder." The younger sat in a corner and listened with the rest of them, and could not imagine what they could mean. "They are always saying it makes me shudder, it makes me shudder. It does not make me shudder," thought he. "That, too, must be an art of which I understand nothing." Now, it came to pass that his father said to him one day, Hearken to me, thou fellow in the corner there. Thou art growing tall and strong, and thou too must learn something by which thou canst earn thy living. Look how thy brother works, but thou dost not even earn thy salt." "Well, father," he replied, "I am quite willing to learn something. Indeed, if it could but it be managed. I should like to learn how to shudder. I don't understand that at all yet." The elder brother smiled when he heard that, and thought to himself, "Good God, what a blockhead that brother of mine is. He will never be good for anything as long as he lives. He who wants to be a sickle must bend himself betimes." The father sighed and answered him, "Thou shalt soon learn what it is to shudder, but thou wilt not earn thy bread by that." Soon after this, the sexton came to the house on a visit, and the father bewailed his trouble and told him how his younger son was so backward in every respect that he knew nothing and learnt nothing. "Just think," he said, "when I asked him how he was going to earn his bread, he actually wanted to learn to shudder." "If that be all," replied the sexton, "he can learn that with me. Send him to me and I will soon polish him." The father was glad to do it, for he thought, "It will train the boy a little." The sexton therefore took him into his house, and he began to ring the bell. After a day or two, the sexton awoke him at midnight, and bade him arise and go into the church tower and ring the bell. "Thou shalt soon learn what shuddering is," thought he, and secretly went there before him, and when the boy was at the top of the tower, turned around and was going to take hold of the bell rope, he saw a white figure standing at the stairs opposite the sounding hall. "Who's there?" cried he, but the figure made no reply, and did not move or stir. "Give an answer," cried the boy, "or take thyself off. Thou hast no business here at night." The sexton, however, remained standing motionless there, and that the boy might think he was a ghost. The boy cried a second time, "What do you want there? Speak if thou art an honest fellow, or I will throw thee down the steps." The sexton thought, "He can't intend to be as bad as his words," uttered no sound, and stood as if he were made of stone. Then the boy called to him for the third time, and as that was also to no purpose, he ran against him and pushed the ghost down the stairs so that it fell down 10 steps and remained lying there in the corner. Thereupon he rang the bell, went home without saying a word, and went to bed and fell asleep. The sexton's wife waited a long time for her husband, but he did not come back. At length she became uneasy and awakened the boy. "Dost thou not know where my husband is? He climbed up the tower before thou did." "No, I don't know," replied the boy, "but someone was standing by the sounding hole on the other side of the steps, and as he would neither give me an answer nor go away, I took him for a scoundrel and threw him downstairs. Just go there and you will see if it was he. I should be sorry if it were." The woman ran away and found her husband, who was lying moaning in the corner and had broken his legs. She carried him down, and then with loud screams she hastened to the boy's father. "Your boy," she cried, "has been the cause of great misfortune. He has thrown my husband down the steps and made him break his leg. Take the good-for-nothing fellow away from our house." The father was terrified and ran thither and scolded the boy. "What wicked tricks are these?" said he. "The devil must have put these into thy head." "Father," he replied, "do not listen to me. I am quite innocent. He was standing there by night, like one who is intended to do some evil. I did not know who it was, and I entreated him 3 times, either to speak or to go away." "Ah," said the father, "I have nothing but unhappiness from you. Go out of my sight. I will see thee no more." "Yes, father, right willingly. Wait only until it is day. Then I will go forth and learn how to shudder, and then I shall at any rate understand one art which will support me." Learn what thou wilt," spake the father. "It is all the same to me. There are 50 thalers for thee. Take these and go into the wide world, and tell no one from whence thou comest, and who is thy father, for I have reason to be ashamed of thee." "Yes, father, it shall be as you will. If you desire nothing more than that, I can easily keep it in mind." When the day dawned, therefore, the boy put his 50 thalers into his pocket, and went forth on the great highway, and continually said to himself, "If I could but shudder, If I could but shudder. Then a man approached who heard this conversation, which the youth was holding with himself. And when they had walked a little further to where they could see the gallows, the man said to him, "Look, there is the tree where 7 men have married the rope maker's daughter, and are now learning how to fly. Sit down below it and wait till night comes, and you will soon learn how to shudder." "If that is all that is wanted," answered the youth, "it is easily done. But if I learn how to shudder as fast as that, thou shalt have my 50 thalers. Just come back to me early in the morning." Then the youth went to the gallows, sat down below it, and waited till evening came. And as he was cold, he lighted himself a fire. But at midnight the wind blew so sharply that despite of his fire, he could not get warm, and the wind knocked the hangmen against each other, and they moved backwards and forwards. Oh my gosh. He thought to himself, Thou shiverest below by the fire, but how those up above must freeze and suffer." And as he felt pity for them, he raised the ladder and climbed up, unbound one of them after the other, and brought down all 7. Then he stirred the fire. He blew it and set them all around it to warm themselves. But they sat there and did not stir, and the fire caught their clothes. So he said, "Take care, or I will hang you up again." Oh my gosh. The dead men, however, did not hear, but were quite silent, and let their rags go on burning. On this he grew angry and said, "If you will not take care, I cannot help you. I will not be burnt with you." And he hung them up again, each in his turn. Then he sat down by his fire and fell asleep. And the next morning the man came to him and wanted to have the 50 thalers, and said, "Well, dost thou know how to shudder?" "No," answered he. "How was I to get to know? Those fellows up there did not open their mouths, and were so stupid that they let the few old rags which they had on their bodies get burnt." Then the man saw that he could not get the 50 thalers that day, and went away saying, "One of this kind has never come my way before." The youth likewise went his way, and once more began to mutter to himself, "Ah, if I could but shudder! Ah, if I could but shudder!" A wagoner was striding behind him, heard that, and asked, "Who are you?" "I don't know," answered the youth. Then the wagoner asked, "From whence comest thou?" "I know not." "Who is thy father, that I may not tell thee?" "What is it that thou art always muttering between thy teeth?" "Ah," replied the youth, "I do so wish I could shudder, but no one can teach me how to." "Give up thy foolish chatter," said the wagoner. "Come, go with me. I will see about a place for thee." The youth went with the wagoner, and in the evening they arrived at an inn, where they wished to pass the night. Then at the entrance of the room, the youth again said quite loudly, "If I could but shudder! If I could but shudder!" The host, who heard this, laughed and said, "If that is your desire, there ought to be a good opportunity for you here." "Ah, be silent," said the hostess. So many inquisitive people have already lost their lives. It would be a pity and shame if such beautiful eyes as these should never see the daylight again." But the youth said, "However difficult it may be, I will learn it. And for this purpose, indeed, I have journeyed forth." He let the host have no rest, until the latter told him that not far from thence stood a haunted castle, when anyone could very easily learn what shuddering was, if he would but watch it for 3 nights. Watch in it. The king had promised that he would he who would venture should have his daughter to wife, and she was the most beautiful maiden the sun shone on. Great treasures likewise laid in the castle, which were guarded by evil spirits, and these treasures would then be freed, and would make a poor man rich enough. Already many men had gone into the castle, but as yet none had come out again. Then the youth went next morning to the king and said if he were allowed, he would watch 3 nights in the haunted castle. The king looked at him, and as the youth pleased him, he said, "Thou mayest ask for 3 things to take into the castle with thee, but they must be things without life." Then he answered, "Then I ask for a fire, a turning lathe, and a cutting board with a knife." The king had these things carried into the castle for him each during the day. When the night was drawing near, the youth went up and made himself a bright fire in one of the rooms, placed the cutting board and knife beside it, and seated himself by the turning lathe. "Ah, if I could but shudder," said he, "but I shall not learn it here either." Towards midnight, he was about to poke his fire, and as he was blowing it, something cried suddenly from one corner. "Oh, meow? How cold are we?" "You simpletons," cried he, "what are you crying about? If you are cold, come and take a seat by the fire and warm yourself." And when he had said that, the 2 great black cats came with one tremendous leap and sat down on each side of him, looked savagely at him with their fiery eyes. After a short time, when they had warmed themselves, they said, "Comrade, shall we have a game at cards?" "Why not?" he replied, "but just show me your paws." Then they stretched out their claws. "Oh, what long nails you have! Wait, I must first cut them for you." Thereupon he seized them by the throats, put them on the cutting board, and screwed their feet fast. "I have looked at your fingers," said he, and my fancy for playing card has gone." And he struck them dead and threw them out into the water. But when he made away with these 2, and was about to sit down by his fire, out from every hole corner came black cats and black dogs with red-hot chains, and more of them came until he could no longer stir, and they yelled horribly and got on his fire, pulling it into pieces and tried to put it out. He watched them for a while quietly, but at last, when they were going too far, he seized his cutting knife and cried, "Away with ye, vermin!" and began to cut them down. Part of them ran away, and the others he killed and threw out into the fish pond. When he came back, he fanned the embers of his fire again and warmed himself, and as he thus sat, his eyes would keep open no longer, and he felt a desire to sleep. Then he looked around and saw a great bed in the corner. "That is the very thing for me," and said he, and got into it. When he was just going to shut his eyes, however, the bed began to move on its own accord, and went over the whole of the castle. "That's right," he said, "but go faster." Then the bed rolled on as if 6 horses were harnessed to it, up and down, over thresholds and steps, but suddenly, hop, hop, it turned over upside down, and lay on him like a mountain. But he threw quilts and pillows in the air, and got out and said, "Now anyone who likes may drive," and lay down by his fire, slept until it was day. In the morning the king came, and when he saw him lying there on the ground, he thought the evil spirits had killed him, and he was dead. Then he said, "After all, it is a pity. He is a handsome man." The youth heard it, and got up and said, "It has not come to that yet." Then the king was astonished, but very glad, and asked how he had fared. "Very well indeed," answered he. "1 night is past, the 2 other will get over likewise." Then he went to the innkeeper, who opened his eyes very wide, and said, "Never expected to see thee alive again. Hast thou learnt how to shudder yet?" "No," said he. "It is all in vain, if someone would but tell me." The second night, he went up into the old castle, sat down by the fire, and once more began his old song, "If I could but shudder." When midnight came, an uproar and a noise of tumbling was heard. At first it was low, but it grew louder and louder. Then it was quiet for a while, and at length, with a loud scream, a half-man came down the chimney and fell before him. "Hollo!" cried he. "Another half belongs to this. This is too little." Then the uproar began again, and there was a roaring and howling, and the other half fell down likewise. "Wait," said he, "I will just blow up the fire a little for thee." When he had done that and looked around again, the two pieces were joined together, and the frightful man was sitting in his place. "That is no part of our bargain," said the youth. "The bench is mine." The man wanted to push him away. The youth, however, would not allow that, but thrust him off with all his might and seated himself again in his own place. Then still more men fell down. One after another they brought 9 dead men's legs and 2 skulls, and set them up and played at 9 pins with them. The youth also wanted to play, and said, "Hark you, can I join you?" "Yes, if thou hast any money." "Money enough," he replied, "but your balls are not quite round." Then he took the skulls and put them in the lathe, and turned them till they were round. Now, they will roll better," said he. "Hurrah, now it goes merrily." He played with them, and lost some of his money, but when it struck 12, everything vanished from his sight. He lay down quietly and fell asleep. Next morning, the king came to inquire after him. "How has it fared with you this time?" asked he. "I have been playing at 9 pins," he answered, "and have lost a couple of farthings." "Hast thou not shuddered then?" "Huh? What?" said he. "I have made merry. If I did but know what it was to shudder." The third night he sat down on his bench again, and said quite sadly, "If I could but shudder." When it grew late, 6 tall men came in and brought a coffin. Then said he, "Ha ha! That is certainly my little cousin who died only a few days ago," and beckoned with his finger, and cried, "Come, little cousin, come." They placed the coffin on the ground, but he went to it, took the lid off, and a dead man lay therein. He felt his face, but it was cold as ice. "Stop," said he, "I will warm thee a little," and went to the fire, and warmed his hands and laid it on the dead man's face, but he remained cold. Then he took him out, sat down by the fire, and laid him on his breast and rubbed his arm, and the blood might circulate again. As this also did no good, he thought to himself, "When 2 people lie in a bed together, they warm each other," and carried him to the bed, covered him over, and laid down by him. After a short time, and the dead man became warm too, and began to move. Then said the youth, "See, little cousin, have I not warmed thee?" The dead man, however, got up and cried, "Now will I strangle thee." "What?" said he. "Is that the way thou thankst me? Thou shalt at once go into thy coffin again." And he took him up, threw him into it, and shut the lid. Then came the 6 men and carried him away. "I cannot manage to shudder," said he. "I shall never learn it here as long as I live." Then a man entered who was taller than all others and looked terrible. He was old, however, and had a long white beard. "Thou wretch," cried he, "thou shalt soon learn what it is to shudder, for thou shalt die." "Not so fast," replied the youth. "If I am to die, I shall have to have a say in it." "I will soon seize thee," said the fiend. "Softly, softly, do not talk so big. I am as strong as thou art, and perhaps even stronger." "We shall see," said the man. "If thou art stronger, I will let thee go. Come, we will try." Then he led him by dark passages to a smith's forge, took an axe, and with one blow struck an anvil into the ground. "I can do better than that," said the youth, and went to the other anvil. The old man placed himself near and wanted to look on, and his white beard hung down. Then the youth seized the axe, split the anvil with one blow, and struck the old man's beard in with it. "Now I have thee," said the youth. "Now it is thou who will have to die." Then he seized an iron bar and beat the old man till he moaned, and entreated him to stop, and he would give him a great riches. The youth drew out the axe and let him go. The old man led him back into the castle, and in the cellar showed him 3 chests full of gold. Of these," said he, "one part is for the poor, and the other for the king. The third is thine." In the meantime, it struck 12, and the spirit disappeared. The youth therefore was left in darkness. I shall sit still here. I shall still be here, able to find my way out," said he, and felt about, found the way into the room, and slept there by his fire. Next morning the king came and said, "Now, thou must have learnt what shuddering is." "No," he answered. "What can it be? My dead cousin was here, and a bearded man came and showed me a great deal of money down below, but no one told me what it was to shudder." "Then," said the king, "thou hast delivered the castle, and shall marry my daughter." "That is all very well," said he, "but still I do not know what it is to shudder." Then the gold was brought up, and the wedding celebrated. But howsoever much the young king loved his wife, and however happy he was, he still said always, "If I could but shudder, if I could but shudder." And at last she was angry at this. Her waiting maid said, "I will find a cure for him, and he shall soon learn what it is to shudder." She went out to the stream which flowed through the garden, and had a whole bucket full of gudgeons brought to her. A night when the young king was sleeping, his wife was to draw the clothes off him and empty the bucket of cold water with gudgeons in it over him, so that the little fishies wouldn't sprawl over him. When this was done, he woke up and cried, "Oh, what makes me shudder so? What makes me shudder so, dear wife? Ah, now I know what it is to shudder." Good for him. He learned what he wanted to learn. The story is quite messed up, yes. But as is lots of Brother Grimm stories. Fish different. Finale Senpai was too scary. My goodness. I think we could probably do one more. Accidentally became a king trying to learn how to shudder. The amount of casualties in that story, though. The amount of casualties was crazy. Okay. Shudderant youth. There was a casualty of like the first one where he pushed the person down the stairs because they were trying to scare him when he was ringing the bell. And there was also the wives of the ropes rope maker. I mean, the husbands of the rope makers. Alright. We continue on. The Wolf and the 7 Little Kids. There was once upon a time an old goat who had 7 little kids and loved them with all the love of the mothers, with all the love of a mother for her children. One day, she wanted to go into the forest and fetch some wood. So she called all 7 to her and said, "Dear children, if I have to go into the forest, be on your guard against the wolf. If he comes in, he will devour you all, skin, hair, and all. The wretch often disguises himself, but you will know him at once by his rough voice and his black feet." The kid said, "Dear mother, we will take good care of ourselves. You may go away without any anxiety." Then the old one bleated and went on her way with an easy mind. It was not long before someone knocked at the house door and called, "Open the door, dear children. Your mother is here and has brought something back with her for each of you." But the children knew that it was the wolf by the rough voice. "We will not open the door," cried they. "Thou art not our mother. She has a soft, pleasant voice, but thy voice is rough. Thou art the wolf." Then the wolf went away to a shopkeeper and bought himself a great lump of chalk, ate this, and his voice became soft with it. Then he came back, knocked at the door of the house, and cried, "Open the door, dear children. Your mother is here and has brought something back with her for each of you." But the wolf had laid his black paws against the window, and the children saw them and cried, "We will not open the door. Our mother has not like feet like thee. Thou art the wolf." Then the wolf ran to a baker and said, "I have hurt my feet. Rub some dough over them for me." And when the baker had rubbed his feet over, he ran to the miller and said, "Strew some white meal over my feet for me." The miller thought to himself, The wolf wants to deceive someone," and refused. But the wolf said, "If thou wilt not do it, I will devour thee." Then the miller was afraid and made his paws white for him. Truly men are like that. What? So now the wretch went for the 3rd time to the house door and knocked at it and said, "Open the door for me, children. Your dear little mother has come home and has brought every one of you something back from the forest with her." The little children cried, "First show us your paws, that we may know if thou art our dear little mother." Then he put his paws in through the window, and the kids saw that they were white. They believed that all he said was true and opened the door. But who should come in but the wolf? They were terrified and wanted to hide themselves. One sprang under the table, the 2nd into the bed, and the 3rd into the stove, the 4th into the kitchen, the 5th into the cupboard, the 6th under the washing bowl, the 7th into the clock case. But the wolf found them all, and used no great ceremony. One after the other, he swallowed them down in his throat. The youngest, who was in the clock case, was the only one he did not find. When the wolf had satisfied his appetite, he took himself off, laid himself down under a tree in the green meadow outside, and began to sleep. Soon afterwards, the old goat came home from the forest. Ah, what a sight she saw there! The house door stood wide open. The chairs, the tables, and the benches were thrown down. She saw the washing bowls lay broken to pieces. The quilts and pillows were pulled off the beds. She sought her children, but they were nowhere to be found. She called them one after another by name, but no one answered. At last, when she came to the youngest, a soft voice cried, "Dear mother, I'm in the clock case." She took the kid out, and it told her that the wolf had come and eaten all the others. Then you may imagine how she wept over her poor children. At length, in her grief, she went out, and the youngest kid ran with her. When they came to the meadow, there lay the wolf by the tree and snored so loud that the branches shook. She looked at him on every side and saw that something was moving and struggling in his gorged belly. Ah, heavens, is it possible that my poor children whom he swallowed down from his supper can still be alive? Then the children had to run home and fetch. The kid had to run home and fetch scissors and a needle and thread, and the goat cut open the monster's stomach. And hardly had she made one cut, then one little kid thrust its head out, and when she got further, all 6 sprang out one after another, and were all still alive, and all suffered no injury whatever, for in his greed the monster had swallowed them down whole. What rejoice there was! They embraced their dear mother and jumped like a sailor at his wedding. The mother, however, said, "Now go and look for some big stones, and we will fill the wicked beast's stomach with them while he is still asleep." Then the 7 kids dragged the stones thither with a speed, but put as many of them into his stomach as they could get in. The mother sewed him up again in his greatest haste, so that he was not aware of anything and never once stirred. When the wolf at length had his sleep out, he got his legs, and as the stone in his stomach made him very thirsty, he wanted to go to the well to get a drink. But when he began to walk and move about, the stones in his stomach knocked against each other and rattled. Then he cried, "What rumbles and tumbles against my poor bones? I thought it was 6 kids, but it was naught but big stones." And when he got to the well and stooped over the water and was about to drink, the heavy stones made him fall in. There was no help, but he had to drown miserably. When the 7 kids saw that, they came running to the spot and cried aloud, "The wolf is dead! The wolf is dead!" and danced for joy around the well with their mother. That's the end of the story. My goodness. The moral of the story is to chew your food, kids. Oh God. Looks are deceiving. That's why you don't ask for feet. Oh God. No feet pics, guys. Indeed. I think this story actually was featured in one of the JoJo scenes, if I remember correctly. Well, that was The Wolf and the 7 Little Kids. Did you guys know that little goats sound like little goats are named like kids? Comeuppance is quite a common theme in these. Well, we've been live for about an hour. I think this next one looks fairly long. Alright. We could do one last one. You know, I said, what's it called? This one seems like a slightly longer one, but after this one, we'll end off, okay? Final story of the night. Faithful John. There was once on a time an old king who was ill and thought to himself, "I am lying on what must be my deathbed." Then said he, "Tell Faithful John to come to me." Faithful John was his favorite servant, and was so called because he had for his whole life long been so true to him. When therefore he came beside the bed, the king said to him, "Most faithful John, I feel my end approaching, and have no anxiety except about my son. He is still of tender age, and cannot always know how to guide himself. If thou dost not promise me to teach him everything that he ought to know, and to be his foster father, I cannot close my eyes in peace." "Then," answered faithful John, "I will not forsake him, and will serve him with fidelity, and even if it should cost my life." On this, the old king said, "Now I die in comfort and peace." Then he added, "After my death, thou shalt show him the whole castle, all the chambers, halls, and vaults, and all the treasures which lie therein. But the last chamber in the long gallery, in which is the picture of the princess of the golden dwelling, shalt thou not show. If he sees that picture, he will fall violently in love with her, and will drop down in a swoon, and go through great danger for her sake. Therefore thou must preserve him from that." And when the faithful John had once more given his promise to the old king about this, the king said no more, but laid his head on his pillow and died. When the old king had carried to his grave, faithful John told the young king all that he had promised his father on his deathbed, and said, "This will I assuredly perform, and will be faithful to thee as I have been faithful to him, even if it should cost me my life." When the morning was over, faithful John said to him, "It is now time that I should see thine inheritance. I will show thee thy father's palace." Then he took him about everywhere, up and down, and let him see all the riches and the magnificent apartments. Only there was one room which he did not open, that in which hung the dangerous picture. The picture was, however, so placed that when the door was open, you looked straight on it. It was so admirably painted that it seemed to breathe and live. There was nothing more charmed or more beautiful in the world. The young king, however, plainly remarked that faithful John always walked past this one door, and said, "Why dost thou never open this one for me?" "There is something within it," he replied, which would terrify thee." But the king answered, "I have seen all the palace, and I will know what is in this room also." And he went and tried to break open the door by force. Then faithful John held him back and said, "I promised thy father before his death that thou shouldst not see that which is in this chamber, and might present the greatest misfortune on thee and on me." "Ah, no," replied the young king. "If I do not go in, it will be my certain destruction. I should have no rest day or night until I have seen it with my own eyes. I shall not leave the palace now until thou hast unlocked the door." Then faithful John saw that there was no help for it now. With a heavy heart and many sighs, sought out the key from the great bunch. When he had opened the door, he went in first, and thought by standing before him he could hide the portrait so that the king should not see it in front of him. But what availed that? The king stood on tiptoes and saw it over his shoulders. And when he saw the portrait of the maiden, which was so magnificent and shone with gold and precious stones, he fell fainting to the ground. Faithful John took him up, carried him to his bed, and sorrowfully thought, "The misfortune has befallen us, Lord. What will be the end of it?" Then he strengthened him with wine until he came to himself again. The first words of the king said, "Ah, the beautiful portrait! Whose is it?" "That is the princess of the golden dwelling," answered faithful John. Then the king continued, "My love for her is so great that if all the leaves on all the trees were tongues, they could not declare it. I will give my life to her. Thou art my most faithful John. Thou must help me." The faithful servant considered within himself for a long time how to set about the matter, for it was difficult to obtain a sight of the king's daughter. At length he thought of a way, and said to the king, "Everything which she has about her is gold. tables, chairs, dishes, glasses, bowls, and the household furniture. Among thy treasures are 5 tons of gold. Let one of the goldsmiths of the kingdom work these up into a manner of vessels and utensils and all kinds of birds, wild beasts and strange animals, such as may please her, and we will go there and with them and try our luck. The king ordered all the goldsmiths to be brought to him, and they had to work night and day until at last the most splendid things were prepared. When everything was stowed on board a ship, faithful John put on the dress of the merchant, and the king was forced to do the same in order to make himself unrecognizable. Then they sailed across the sea and sailed on until they came to the town wherein dwelt the princess of Gold Dwelling. Faithful John bade the king stay behind on the ship and wait for him. Perhaps I shall bring the princess with me, he said, and therefore see that everything is in order, and have the golden vessels set out and the whole ship decorated. Then he gathered together in his apron with all kinds of gold things, went on shore, and walked straight to the royal palace. When he entered the courtyard of the palace, a beautiful girl was standing there by the well and 2 golden buckets in her hand, drawing water with them. And when she was just turning around to carry away the sparkling water, she saw the stranger and asked, Who was he? So he answered, I am a merchant, and opened his apron and let her look in. And then she cried, Oh, what beautiful gold things! And put her pails down and looked at the golden wares one after another. Then said the girl, The princess must see these. She has such great pleasure in gold things, and that she will buy all you have. She took him by the hand and led him upstairs, for she was the waiting maid. When the king's daughter saw the wares, she was quite delighted and said, They are so beautiful and worked that I will buy them all of thee. But faithful John said, I am only the servant of a rich merchant. The things I have here are not to be compared with those my master has in his ship. They are the most beautiful and valuable things that have ever been made in gold. She wanted to have everything brought to her there, but he said, There are so many of them that it would take a great many days to do that, and so many rooms would be required to exhibit them, that your house is not big enough. Then her curiosity and longing was still more excited, until at last she said, Conduct me to the ship. I will go there myself, and behold the treasures of thine master. On this, faithful John was quite delighted, and led her to the ship. And when the king saw her, he perceived that her beauty was even greater than the picture he had represented it to be, and thought no other than that his heart would burst in twain. Then she got into the ship, and the king led her within. Faithful John, however, remained behind the pilot, and ordered the ship to be pushed off, saying, Set sail till it fly like a bird in air. Within, however, the king showed her the golden vessels, every one of them, also the wild beasts and strange animals. Many hours went by whilst she was seeing everything, and in her delight she did not observe that the ship was sailing away. After she had looked at the last, she thanked her merchant and wanted to go home. But when she came to the side of the ship, she saw that it was on the deep sea, far from land, and hurried onwards with all sails set. Ah, she cried in her alarms, I am betrayed. I am carried away and fallen into the power of a merchant. I would die rather. The king, however, seized her hand and said, I am not a merchant. I am a king, and am of no meaner origin than thou art. And if I have carried thee away with subtlety, that has come to pass because of my exceeding great love for thee. The first time that I looked on thy portrait, I fell fainting onto the ground. When the princess of the gold dwelling heard that, she was comforted, and her heart was inclined unto him, so that she willingly consented to be his wife. It so happened, however, while they were sailing onwards over the deep sea, that faithful John, who was sitting on the forepart of the vessel, making music, saw the 3 ravens in the air, which came flying towards him. On this he stopped playing and listened to what they were saying to each other, for that he well understood. One cried, "Oh, there he is, carrying home the princess of the golden dwelling." "Yes," replied the second, "but he has not gotten her yet," said the third. "But he has got her. She is sitting beside him in the ship." Then the first began again and cried, "What good will that do him? When they reach land, a chestnut horse will leap forward to meet him, and the prince will want to mount it. But if he does that, it will run away with him and rise up into the air with him. He will never see his maiden more." Spake the second, "But is there no escape?" "Oh yes, if anyone else gets on it swiftly and takes out the pistol which must be in its holster and shoots the horse dead with it, the young king is saved. But who knows that? And whoever so does know it and tells it to him will be turned to stone from toe to knee." Then said the second, "I know more than that. Even if the horse be killed, the young king will still not be able to keep his bride. When they go into the castle together, a wrought bridal garment will be lying there in a dish, and looking as if it were woven of gold and silver. It is, however, nothing but sulphur and pitch, and if he put it on, it will burn him to every bone, the very bone and marrow." Said the third, "Is there no escape at all?" "Oh yes," replied the second. "If anyone with gloves on seizes the garment and throws it into the fire and burns it, the king will be saved. But what avails that? Whoever so knows it and tells it to him, half his body will become stone from knee to heart." Then the third, "I know there's still more. Even if the bridal garment be burnt, the young king will still not be able to have his bride. After the wedding, when the dancing begins, the youngest queen is dancing, and she will suddenly turn pale and fall down as if dead, and if someone does not lift her up and draw 3 drops of blood from her right breast and spit them out again, she will die. But if anyone who knows that were to declare it, it would become stone from the crown of his head to the sole of his foot." When the raven had spoken of this together, they flew onwards, and faithful John had well understood everything, but from that time forth he had become quiet and sad, for he concealed what he had heard from his master. The latter would be unfortunate. For if he concealed what he had heard from his master, the latter would be unfortunate. And if he discovered it to him, he himself must be sacrificed his life. At length, however, he said to himself, "I will save my master, even if it brings destruction to myself." When therefore they came to shore, all happened as had been foretold by ravens, and as a magnificent chestnut horse sprang forward. "Good," said the king, "he shall carry me to my palace," and was about to mount it, when faithful John got before him, jumped quickly on it, drew the pistol out of the holster, and shot the horse. And the other attendants of the king, who after all were not very fond of faithful John, cried, "How shameful to kill the beautiful animal that was to carry the king to his palace!" But the king said, "Hold your peace and leave him alone. He is my most faithful John, who knows what may be the good of that." They went into the palace, and in the hall there stood a dish, and therein lay the bridal garment, looking no otherwise than as if it were made of gold and silver. The young king went towards it, and was about to take hold of it, but faithful John pushed him away, seized it with gloves on, quickly and carried it quickly to the fire and burnt it. The other attendants again began to murmur, and said, "Behold, now he is even burning the king's bridal garments." But the young king said, "Who knows what good he may have done? Leave him alone. He is my most faithful John." And now the wedding was solemnized. The dance began. The bride also took part in it. Then faithful John was watchful, and looked into her face, and suddenly she turned pale and fell to the ground, as if she were dead. On this he ran hastily to her, lifted her up, and bore her into a chamber. Then he laid her down, and knelt and sucked 3 drops of blood from her right
rest, and spat them out. Immediately she breathed again and recovered herself, but the young king had seen this, and being ignorant why faithful John had done it, was angry and cried, "Throw him into a dungeon." Next morning, faithful John was condemned and led to the gallows, and when he stood on high, was about to be executed, he said, "Everyone who has to die is permitted before his end to make one last speech. May I too claim the right?" "Yes," answered the king, "it shall be granted unto thee." Then faithful John said, "I am unjustly condemned, and have always been true to thee." And he related how he had hearkened to the conversation of the ravens on the sea, and how he had been obliged to do all these things in order to save his master. Then cried the king, "Oh, my most faithful John, pardon, bring him down." But as faithful John spoke the last word, he had fallen down lifeless and become a stone. Therefore the king and the queen suffered great anguish. And the king said, "Ah, how ill I have requited great fidelity," and ordered the stone figure to be taken up and placed in his bedroom beside his bed. And as often as he looked on it and wept and said, "Ah, if I could bring thee to life again, my most faithful John." Some time passed, and the queen bore twins. 2 sons who grew fast were her delight. Once when the queen was at the church, and the 2 children were sitting and playing beside their father, the latter, full of grief, and again looked at the stone figure, and sighed and said, "Ah, if I could but bring thee back to life again, my most faithful John." Then the stone began to speak and said, "Thou canst bring me to life again if thou canst bring me back to life again if thou wilt use for that purpose what is dearest to thee." Then cried the king, "I will give everything I have in the world for thee." The stone continued, "If thou will cut off the head of thy 2 children with thine own hand and sprinkle me with their blood, I shall be restored to life." The king was terrified when he heard that he himself must kill his dearest children, but the thought of faithful John's great fidelity and how he had died for him drew his sword, and with his own hands cut off the children's head, and he had smeared the stone with their blood. Life returned to it, and faithful John stood once more safe and healthy before him. He said to the king, "Thy truth shall not go unrewarded," and took the heads of the children, put them on again, and rubbed the wounds of their blood, on which they became whole again immediately, and jumped about, and went on playing as if nothing had happened. Then the king was full of joy, and when he saw the queen was coming, he hid faithful John and the 2 children in the great cupboard. When she entered, he said to her, "Hast thou been praying in the church?" "Yes," answered she, "but I have constantly been thinking of faithful John, and what misfortune had befallen him through us." Then said he, "My dear wife, we can give him life again, but it will cost us our 2 little sons whom we must sacrifice." The queen turned pale. Her heart was full of terror, but she said, "We owe it to him for his great fidelity." Then the king was rejoiced that she thought as he had thought, and went open the cupboard and brought forth faithful John and the children, and said, "God be praised, he is delivered, and we have our little sons again also," and told her how everything had occurred. Then they dwelt together in much happiness until their death. Man, Brother Grimm's tales are amazing. These tales are great. Oh, am I stuck? Oh. Uh-oh. I'm stuck. Well, it's you know what? We were going to end off here regardless. So was this a great ending? It's such an interesting story. You know, nobody has turned into stone like John. Oh no, whatever shall we do? The only way to fix this is to like No, don't do it, guys. Yes, yes. Was that? Oh, sorry. What do you guys think? What did you guys think of the stories? There are still many, many more stories in this book. We are actually quite close to Rapunzel. It's The Good Bargain, The Wonderful Musician, The 12 Brothers, The Pack of Rugmuffins, Little Brother and Little Sister, Rapunzel. Maybe next time, you know? It was very interesting. Thank you. Kosa-san, thank you so much for the super. Thank you for telling the interesting stories. You are very good at narration. It was great. Like, yay! I'm glad you think so. Thank you, thank you. They were fun. Yeah. Quite interesting. Love fairy tale readings. I absolutely love fairy tales as well. We read a few of them today, and feel free to like watch back on the VOD to and use it to go to bed as well whenever you need to. Good narrator equals good shoutcaster. When will the next one be? Sometime in the future. I think I might try to do these maybe like once a month. Just so it's not too often, and people can catch up on the older ones first, you know? Crisp. Guys, the book, when you turn the pages, so satisfying. Thank you, that was pretty hilarious in a grim way. Mingus Chunky Bird, thank you for the super. And in this way, I get to hear all the grim tale and fairy tales I never got to read. Pog! Indeed, indeed. It was quite fun for me to read it as well. A couple of the stories actually were my first time reading too. I've read a few, like I've read quite a lot of Brother Grimm tales in the past, but a couple of them, it was my first time, and I was like, oh, interesting. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming by to the stream today, and I hope you enjoyed the the ASMR. I will tomorrow we'll have a stream again, so have a look over at my Twitter account and see what I will be doing, okay? Yeah. Alrighty. Oh, thank you so much for coming by, and sleep well. Sleep well. Oyasumi nasai. Oyasumi nasai. Otsumariri.